Well, good morning. So good to see you all, and welcome again to Fifi Baptist Church. My name is Matt. If we hadn't had a chance to meet before, and my thanks to Daryl for stepping in last week as we were on vacation in Colorado. But it's good to be back here, and if I look a little bit droopy-eyed, it's probably from driving straight through on the way home, but we got back on Wednesday night, so I've had a little bit of time to recover. But it's great to be back with you today. We're continuing our Wiser series. And we've been walking through the wisdom books of the Old Testament, focusing mostly on Proverbs so far. We're going to wrap up Proverbs today, looking at how to be wiser with our work. Then next week, we'll look at Job, as the Harris Trio just sang about. And then we're going to wrap it up with Ecclesiastes here in a couple more weeks. That's kind of the plan for the next few weeks anyway. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to study what Proverbs has to say about working wisely. Now, this is an important question for us. How can I be wiser with my work? Well, if you think about it, why is this so important? Well, if you got to add up all the amount of time that you work in your lifetime, the average person spends about 150,000 hours of their life working. So that's about 40% of your waking hours of your existence. Now, if you're a mother of toddler, it's probably closer to 98 to 100% of your waking hours is working, but for most of us, it's around 40% of the hours that you're awake. And we as Americans, we love to work, or at least people love to make us work. 30 years ago, the average American spent 40 hours a week at work. Today, the average American spends 46 hours working. If you're a professional, you're looking more at 52 hours. Small business owner or operator, it's closer to 57 hours a week at work. And this doesn't count any of the work you do around your house, right? Like yard work or cleaning or maintenance, all that kind of stuff. That's on top of what you're doing when you're working for the man. So the fact is, you're going to spend more of your life working or commuting to work or thinking about work than you will spend eating, drinking, playing on weekends, vacationing combined. So work, as humans, work dominates our life. And so since work is such an important part of our lives, we do really well to listen to what Proverbs has to say about how to honor God, how to work wisely. And when we look at Proverbs, we see that God wants us to succeed in our jobs. God wants us to succeed in our work. Here's how Proverbs 16 verse 3 puts it. It says, commit your work, there's the work, commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. Now, it's important here to kind of remind us of this distinction we've been making throughout this series. We're going to hit it really hard the next two sermons. This idea of the difference between a principle and a promise. The book of Proverbs is about principles. It's not about promises. So if we look at this verse, generally speaking, as a matter of principle, if you commit your work to the Lord, then your plans will be established. As a matter of principle, generally speaking, that's the case, but it's not a guarantee. There's always exceptions. So we're looking at principles, not promises. But generally speaking, though, that's what we're going to look at today. If you do indeed commit your work to the Lord, your plans are going to succeed. But what does this mean? How do I commit my work to the Lord? How do I commit every action of my job to God in such a way that I succeed, such in a way that my plans will be established? Now, as we walk through the book of Proverbs, we're going to see 6 different ways for us to commit our work to the Lord. And these are all kind of things you should be doing all 6 all at once. We're going to see 6 different actions to succeed at work, to be working wisely. Now, number 1, the first action is to seek God's direction. You seek God's direction. It has to start here. You see, it takes more than just hard work to succeed. You can work really hard at something, but you're going down the wrong way, and you're actually going to make things worse. There's a lot of people out there who work very hard, but they're not going anywhere fast. It takes more than just hard work to succeed at our job. You need prayer, you need planning, you need God's direction. And so this first step to succeed at work, you start by seeking God's direction. What does this look like? Well, I read a story recently of about a young Canadian man who moved to Buffalo, New York. Now, this was a fair bit of time ago. He moved to New York, Buffalo, to work in a cheese business. So this Canadian moved down, and his business partners turned out being a little bit shady. They take him on a business trip from Buffalo, New York to Chicago, and when they get to Chicago, they abandon the guy in Chicago. Only had $65 to his name. in the downtown Chicago, again, quite a while ago. And so this young man decides, well, I'm going to take the 65 bucks I've got, and I'm going to use this to try to start my own cheese business. So he buys himself a wagon, buys a horse, and starts selling his own cheese. And this was 1903. And things went pretty well at first for this young guy. But eventually he saw that his business started to fail. Gets very confused. He's like, I used the 65 bucks, things were going well, but now it's starting to crash. So he starts talking to a friend of his, and his friend tells him, says, hey man, the problem is you didn't commit your business to God. You've been working without God's help. So this young man who's trying to sell cheese finally tells his friend, hey, look, man, if God wants to run the cheese business, then let him have it. I'll work for God. He can be the boss. And from that moment on, God started to become the senior business partner, if you will, of this young man's business. It prospered and it grew, and it became the largest cheese company in the world. And the young man's name was J.L. Kraft, which you may have heard of Kraft cheese. Now I think all of us are hungry for mac and cheese. So have you sought God's direction at your job, like J.L. Kraft eventually did? You see, you're going to spend about half of your life working, and if God is not involved in that aspect of your life, that's 40% to 50% of your life that God's not involved in. So if we want to really honor God with our whole existence, that needs to include our jobs. We need to ask God, seek God's direction. Hey, God, what do you want me to do with my life? What do you want to do with my career? Now, this might sound at first like a silly prayer, like, does God really care about my job? It's just something I do. But don't think about it that way. Proverbs 15:8 tells us that the Lord delights in the prayers of the upright. So take a moment to seek God's direction at your job. Ask for God's advice. That's the sign of a wise person. So you seek God's direction and you plan following God's direction. Proverbs 21 verse 5 tells us that the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to want. So you think before you act, you ask for God's direction, you set some career goals. Hey, look, it's fun to be spontaneous sometimes, right? Like I mentioned the Colorado trip we took, that was not spontaneous. But when I didn't have children and when life was a little bit less complicated, my wife Andrea and I used to love to take like spontaneous vacations. We were living in New Zealand for my doctoral study, and New Zealand's beautiful. And so I remember one Sunday we were sitting in church, and I guess the sermon was boring or something. I don't know why, but I started whispering to my wife, hey, you want to take a vacation after church? And so that's what we did. Like, church was over, we said bye to our friends, went home, threw a bunch of clothes in a bag, and drove to the mountains and just kind of figured it out. It's kind of hard to do in New Zealand because they don't have as many hotels and McDonald's and all the rest, but here I am. We made it. And it was fun. And spontaneous vacations like that are fun sometimes, but that's not the way we should live the rest of our life. Vacations are different for a reason. Generally speaking, it's best to think ahead, not to be spontaneous. We take time to plan. Successful people are going to be thinking further ahead than those who are not successful. And as you think further ahead, you do that under God's guidance, through prayer. You plan, you think ahead prayerfully. So you ask, hey, God, where do you want me to be? What do you want my job to be like in, say, 5 years or 10 years or 15 years? You pray, you talk with God, and then you write that down. You set some goals. You seek God's direction as you set these goals. And when you do this, remember that God is the one who's in control anyway. And that's a really comforting thing, actually. Proverbs 19:21 assures us, the human mind may devise many plans, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will be established. And again, this is an encouraging thing. We can make all the plans that we want, and we should make all of these plans, but ultimately, God's purpose will prevail. And thanks be to God for that, right? God's the one who's over the whole thing, but we seek God's direction in our job. We invite him in to this really central part of our existence as human beings. So that's the first step. We seek God's direction. Number two, we show up and we work hard. So after we seek God's direction, if we want to get wiser with our work, it's time to get to work. You show up, you work hard. And if you read through the book of Proverbs in one sitting, or if you read through Proverbs regularly, some people read like a chapter a day, and there's 31 days in some of the months, there's 31 chapters, whatever it takes, right? If you read through Proverbs regularly, you're going to be meeting a guy quite often that Proverbs calls the sluggard, or the lazy person. And Proverbs will often say something like, the sluggard does this, but the diligent person does that. Or the lazy person does this, but the hard worker does that. And the book of Proverbs addresses laziness a lot, because laziness has always been a problem. You don't have to say that there's only lazy people now. Any time in history, there's been enough lazy people where if you throw a rock, you'll probably hit one eventually. So let's face it, laziness is a temptation, isn't it? I suspect that we're all tempted to be lazy. We're all tempted to find the easy way out through a tough situation, or to kind of let things fall apart, or to choose to be lazy instead of working hard. But Proverbs warns us against this. Proverbs warns us that laziness is dangerous. Proverbs 6, verses 9 through 11 might be some of my favorite verses. I like to throw this to college students on the regular, actually. Proverbs 6, verse 9 and following. How long will you lie there, O lazy bones? When will you rise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed warrior. So to be wiser with our work, therefore, we need to abandon laziness, and we need to get to work, start working hard. For one, lazy people are incredibly draining to be around. Have you ever worked with a lazy person? It's the worst. And I remember several years ago, I used to work in a construction type of business where we put up fences, right? You dig holes in the ground, and it's hard. You're carrying heavy material, you're digging through rock, especially in Wildwood. Don't put up a fence in Wildwood, it is the worst. You're digging through rock and all of this, or Imperial is brutal. Cutting through roots in Webster Groves, all of this, mixing concrete, all of this in 100-degree weather, it's hard. There's something about digging through solid rock that kind of makes you appreciate a cold cup of water, I guess. I remember one time, honestly, in Wildwood, I used a jackhammer on a hole for about an hour and get down about 6 inches. It's hard. So anyway, what was worse than any amount of heat, though, any rock in the soil, any heavy lifting, what was worse than any of that is if you got stuck with a lazy guy as your helper. Now, that's the worst. It's like you got to tell the guy, like, all right, get out of the truck, man. Turn off the air conditioning. Get to work. Start digging a hole. Mix that concrete. Do I have to tell you everything? Get your stuff together, man. It's like trying to walk through sand, dragging a 200-pound weight behind you. It's like, get out of the shade. Get to work. Step it up. Lazy people are a drag to be around. And you can almost hear that in Proverbs 6, 9 through 11, can't you? Lazy bones, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of your hands to rest. And I keep waiting for the Proverbs to say, like, all right, princess, are you ready to get out? That's what it feels like. Lazy people are. So on the one hand, you don't want to be that lazy person. You don't want to be that 200-pound weight that someone else is trying to drag through the sand, because those people are a pain to be around. But on the other hand, on the positive side, I suppose, Proverbs also teaches us that those who work hard are those who succeed. Again, principle, not promise. But Proverbs 13, verse 4 says, the appetite of the lazy craves and gets nothing, while the appetite of the diligent is richly supplied. And perhaps you've noticed this. There's lazy people out there who are lazy and they're wanting more and more, and they're wondering, why don't I have more? It's like, Holmes, you're lazy. And there's other people who are working really hard and they're prospering as a result. So see, this is working wisely. We're sacrificing the pleasure of relaxation today for the prosperity in the future. So a wise person, first, they seek God's direction. Second, they show up and they work hard. They're not lazy. Third, to succeed in our work, to work wisely, you sharpen your skills. Sharpen your skills. Look, no matter how long you've been doing something, no matter how long you've been at your particular type of career, you can always get better. You can always be wiser in your work, developing those talents and those abilities that God has given you, and you sharpening your skills. You do this by committing to continue learning. Now, this is taught throughout all the Bible, right, where we see the cream rising to the top. Just think of some of the biblical characters that you might know from Sunday school or from VBS, which, man, this stuff's awesome, by the way. I'm glad I was out of town, didn't have to do anything. This is amazing. So you learn these Bible stories in VBS. Think of Joseph or David or Deborah or Daniel or Phoebe. All of these folks rise to the top in the Bible. These were people who sharpened their skills and who kind of stand apart from the rest of them. And so if you're wanting to know if you're sharpening your skills or not, ask yourself, Am I more valuable to my business, to my company, than I was a year ago? Am I a better employee? Am I more valuable now than I was 12 months ago? If the answer is no, then perhaps it's time to commit to sharpening your skills. So how do you do that? Well, there's a couple of ways. The first way I wouldn't suggest, but it works, is through trial and error. Now, this could be the hard way, right? You learn from experience, but learning from experience is not exactly all it's cracked up to be, especially when this experience is painful. So there's a better way. You can learn from experience if you want, but the better way is the second way, which is to learn from other people's experience. It's wise to learn from the experiences of others, but it's wise to learn from your own experience, but it's even more wiser, if you will, to learn from the experience of other people. Hey, look, we don't have time to make all the mistakes that everyone else has made. Life's too short for that. Life's so short, let's learn from others. You learn from other people by listening to good resources, by finding a good podcast or something, by reading good books, by asking advice from people. In fact, getting good advice is one of the wisest things that you can do. Proverbs 15:22 puts it this way. It says, without counsel, plans go wrong. Without advice, plans go wrong. But with many advisors, they succeed. So you talk to people who are doing what you want to do. You look at someone who's further along in the career than you are, and you ask, what did you do to get here? What worked? What didn't work? You read some good books. You read some journals in your field. You build a network of advisors to help you sharpen your skills. Now, to be sure, Christians of all people, I think, ought to be the most skilled people in the workplace. I think we as Christians should be leading the way on this. And so seek out good advice. It is in the advice of others that your plans and your work will have a better chance of success, again, after we seek God's direction. But it's more than just seeking advice. We also have to listen to the advice when it comes across as hard advice, advice that may not be glowing. To work wisely, we need to be prepared to accept discipline or difficult advice. Proverbs 10:17 is clear. Whoever heeds instruction is on the path to life, but the one who rejects a rebuke goes astray. So to be wiser with your work then, you strive to sharpen your skills continually. I want to challenge you to commit to that today. Continually sharpen your skills for the glory of God. Try to be better and better and better. Next week, try to do a better job at your work than you did last week. You're on and on. You're always developing, always improving, always growing, sharpening your skills, whatever that looks like for your line of work. So after you sharpen your skills, number 4, to be wiser with our work, is to serve with integrity. Serve with integrity. Now, integrity, or the lack thereof, is going to make or break your business. And we know this, right? In recent memory, we've seen Fortune 500 companies and big accounting firms topple because of dishonesty, for a lack of integrity. We think of Enron, Arthur Andersen, WorldCom, Lehman Brothers, and so on and so on. We've seen this from personal experience. But Proverbs 10:19 tells us, whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever follows perverse ways will be found out. And indeed, that's true. If you're living dishonestly, it's going to catch up with you. The IRS is really hard to hide from. And when they come, they can carry a lot of different sticks to get us in line with the IRS. But it's even harder to hide from the people closer to you than the IRS. It's really hard to hide from your coworkers, from your customers, from your family. And it's impossible, of course, to hide from God. And hear what God says about integrity in Proverbs 11:20. Crooked minds are an abomination to the Lord, but those of blameless ways are his delight. That's a cool thought, isn't it? God delights in those who have integrity. So if you're walking with integrity, if you're an honest person, according to Proverbs, you are quite literally making God happy through your honesty, through your life of integrity. That's a really cool thought. But more than just making God happy, which is itself is a really big deal, you make God happy, but there's benefits in this life too when you serve with integrity. Because it's going to show the people closest to you, again, your coworkers, your customers, your family. It's going to show out to those people that you're a trustworthy person, which is going to ultimately help your business. And more, we're seeing that businesses are growing sensitive to the way that they treat their customers. Have you noticed recently how, if you go to a fast food joint, almost all of them on the receipt will have a survey for you to fill out? Maybe it's just me, but on these receipts, or sometimes you'll get like a ping if you use the app or whatever. They'll offer you some sort of deal. Maybe it's a drawing, a couple bucks off a sandwich. Wendy's usually offers like a couple dollars off a sandwich. Chick-fil-A will give you a free sandwich. Pizza Hut will add you some drawing. Burger King will give you a free sandwich. I feel like this is like confessional here. I shouldn't know all of this, but alas, I do. And I fill these things out. Like I literally filled out a Chick-fil-A survey like less than 24 hours ago. So I really do this. Now, why do these businesses give us these surveys? Why are they essentially paying you, in sandwiches, if you will, for your opinion? Well, on the one hand, the answer is obvious. They care about your opinion, or at least they tell you that they care about your opinion. They want to make their business better, so they want to get our feedback. Okay, fine, yeah, sure, I imagine that's true to some point. But I think it's more than that. I think Chick-fil-A and Burger King and the rest give out these surveys as a way of keeping their own employees honest. The thought that if I'm an employee and that person I just serve can fill out a survey and more or less tattle on me and has all the details on the receipt to say the time of day, the store, and all the rest, it's a way of keeping their employees honest, helping them serve with integrity. And to be honest, I've noticed sometimes that when I use these survey coupons, they treat me like extra nice. Now, Chick-fil-A, they always treat me extra nice. Christian chicken's great. But even at like the other places that aren't like baptized chicken, they still treat me better, it seems, like when I use the coupon, the survey thing, So you go to Wendy's, here's a couple bucks off your sandwich. Oh, sir, can I help you with anything else? Can I upgrade you for a free larger soda or something like that? They start kind of showering you with extra attention because they realize I'm the kind of guy who will fill out a survey. So you see, these surveys are a way of enforcing integrity, if you will, on the employees. And the truth is, and we know this, integrity matters. The way we treat others makes an enormous difference. And those who work wisely are going to insist on doing things with integrity in their business, even if at first it hurts the bottom line. So when you live with integrity, even if it hurts you at first, it's going to benefit you in the long term on the bottom line. And even if it doesn't, you're still making God happy, which that alone is worth everything. And so Solomon encourages us, Proverbs 3:3-4, do not let loyalty and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and of people. So serve with integrity. Decide ahead of time always to tell the truth. Decide ahead of time always to be honest. Make it a habit never to lie, even if your boss asks you to lie. And they do that sometimes, right? I have a friend who used to work in a jewelry business, and they did this thing where they would buy people would turn in their old jewelry, and then they'd melt down the gold and reuse it and make a new piece. And it's like a way of honoring some old jewelry that's no good anymore and turn it whatever. And so what the boss would do is he would just buy back the old jewelry and just use fresh gold and then tell them they used that old other gold. That's crooked, that was grandma's necklace that I turned. And so my friend refused to do that, and it became a whole thing, and she almost got fired over it, and all this is bad. But she served with integrity, and God blessed her for it. So you serve with integrity, you work wisely, you find good favor with God's people, and you're going to gain a good reputation through serving with integrity. So that's number 4. 2 more. Number 5, you share the profit. Now, this is about sharing what we earn from our jobs. Whether you're a business owner, whether you're an employee, the income you make from your business is about sharing, giving back to God from what you earn. Listen to this list of important businessmen from American history. William Colgate, founder of Colgate Palmolive, hard for me to say. William Procter, founder of Procter & Gamble. Robert Welch, founder of Welch's Grape Juice. Us Baptists really like him. John D. Rockefeller, founder of Standard Oil. J.C. Penney, founder of J.C. Penney. Now, list off all these guys. What do these guys have in common? Well, all of these are important businessmen who have published testimonies about how they gave back to God and how giving to God was the difference in their business. And from the very beginning of their businesses, these men of God said that God's going to be my business partner, much like J.L. Kraft, who we talked about earlier. And they say that they're going to give at least 10% of their income back to God. Now, as they became wealthier, many of these folks gave more than that. 15, 20, 25, 30%, 50%, or whatever. Some of them, like J.C. Penney, was actually tithing 90% and just living off the 10%. Now, J.C. Penney can pull that off. Most of us probably can't. But he was able to do that, and they died or lived just on this 10%. They made God their business partner. And when we're wiser at work, it's going to play out in what we do with the money we earn from our jobs. And when I commit my work to the Lord, that means including giving as part of that income back to God. Here's what Proverbs has to say. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 through 10. Honor the Lord with your substance. That is, honor the Lord with what you receive, and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. So you honor the Lord with the first part of what you make from your work, and God's going to bless your life, and he's going to bless your business because you've honored him in the small things. So a truly wise person, therefore, according to Proverbs, is going to share the profits by giving back to God, and then, of course, by sharing with other people, too. And it's a good thing for us. Proverbs 11, 24 through 25 tells us the more we give, the more we receive. Verse 24, some give freely, yet grow all the richer. Others withhold what is due and only suffer want. A generous person will be enriched, and one who gives water will get water. So notice how that it's in giving away that we receive. It's like we're pouring out a bucket of water, and the more water that comes out, the bucket starts to fill up. That's how the Proverbs 11 is kind of putting it. The more we give, the more we receive, again, as a matter of principle. So to be wiser with our work, we share our wealth that God has given us. And finally, the sixth principle, to be wiser with our work, is to stick with it, to stay with it. I'm going to adjust my microphone here. All right, hopefully that'll help. So you stay with it. Now this is about persistence. And persistence is a major theme in Proverbs. Perseverance, persistence, diligence, determination, tenacity, endurance, grit. These are all the qualities that Proverbs say are ingredients for your success at work. And just to say, as I think of it, there's been some studies of college students, and they're finding that the college students who succeed, what you should really look for is not so much intelligence, but grit, perseverance. The smart kids who don't work hard are going to fail, whereas the kids who may struggle academically but who still put in the work, they are the ones who succeed. And I teach Greek every year, and I'll tell you, I've seen that to be true. Those who work hard, even though they may come in and you might think on paper this student's going to struggle, those who work hard do well. Those who come in and kind of think they can wing it, they never do well. So it's that perseverance, it's that grit that really makes the difference. It's that ability to continue being a hard worker. And persistence pays off. You conquer by continuing. You become a success simply by outlasting your critics. The oak tree, of course, is just a little nut that refused to give its ground. So you keep on keeping on like an oak tree. You see, so many people just give up too soon. But successful people, on the other hand, they keep on keeping on. They don't know how to quit on their dreams. So you can't take the easy route to success. Proverbs 12:11 reads, "Those who till their land will have plenty of food, but those who follow worthless pursuits have no sense." If somebody asked William Carey, you may have heard of William Carey before, kind of the founder of the modern missionary movement, WMU. If you go to that, they probably have talked about William Carey before. And people came to William Carey one time and they asked Carey, "What is the secret to your success?" And Carey's answer, he says, "I can plod." Now, we don't use the word plod very much. I can plod. And kind of the way I'd say it is, I keep on trucking. That's more or less what he's saying. I can plod. I keep on trucking. And William Carey has an amazing testimony of perseverance. In fact, he worked for 7 years in India before baptizing his first convert. Can you imagine that? 7 years, nothing. And then finally the door starts to open. William Carey, he could plod. He knew how to keep on trucking. He kept plodding along. He kept being persistent in this work that God had called him to. He was tenacious with a determined attitude. So Proverbs says, hang in there. Look, there's no shortcut to success. Now, what keeps us from being wiser with our work? What keeps us from having that grit? What's holding us back? Well, I'd suggest that what's holding us back is really a problem of motivation. We need to embrace, if we want to be wiser with our work, we need to embrace the right motivation. Everybody wants to give up sometimes. That's normal. Some of you are probably discouraged this morning. Some of you might be frustrated with your job. You're sick, you're tired of your job, you want to quit. Maybe you want to quit loudly and blast it on TikTok or whatever. But before you do, take a break. Consider your motivation. Look, everyone's motivated to work for usually one of three reasons. Many of us, number one, are motivated with an external motivation. That's working for a paycheck, or working for a pat on the back, or working for perks like a closer parking spot to the front door or whatever. This is an external motivation. These are fine, nothing wrong with any of that. But some people only work for that external motivation. Other people work for an internal motivation. This is working more for personal satisfaction. You work because it makes you feel good. This is kind of going to be more the service fields or a secret from academia. You don't pay people very well, but you tell them it's a calling. That kind of thing. You work for the internal motivation, something that's going to raise your self-esteem, something that's going to give you a good feeling. Now, these first two motivations are fine. Nothing wrong with them. Working for a paycheck, you got to feed your kids. You may as well do it. Working for an internal motivation, that's a good thing too. But these things will rarely carry you through a crisis. And Scripture says you need a third kind of motivation when it comes to your work. To be truly wiser with your work, to find true fulfillment in your job, you need a third eternal motivation. Such that whatever you're doing, you need that eternal motivation to keep you motivated. Where you see, I'm working not for today, I'm not working for a paycheck, I'm not working for a sense of gratification. So those things will come and go, but I'm working for the Lord. Now to dip our toe in the New Testament just a little bit, and then we'll go back to the Old. Looking at the New Testament, the Apostle Paul tells us, Colossians chapter 3, verse 23. He says, whatever your task, in other words, whatever your job, put yourselves into it as done for the Lord and not for your masters. So you have a boss at work, but he's not your real boss. Your boss at work, she's not your real boss. Your real boss is God. And if you're a Christian, remember that you're working for the Lord, and so you work as if God is your boss. God's the one who's going to reward you because he's the real master that you're actually serving. So we're working for God. We're not looking for rewards here on earth. We're working with that eternal perspective that one day we're going to stand before Lord Jesus, and Jesus is going to say, well done, good and faithful servant. You did the best you could with what you had. You worked with that eternal motivation. And again, if we're working approximately 40% of our waking hours, that's a huge chunk of our lives that we need to commit to the Lord and work with that eternal motivation. So stop looking for promotions here on earth and start saying, what does God think about my job? What does God think about the effort I'm putting into my work? And realize that God's watching. God's your real boss. God's going to be the one who will reward you. And God's going to reward you if you work with the right attitude. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, this is a great way to live out your witness at work. Yeah, I mentioned the construction job earlier, the lazy guy. There's one guy there that's not lazy at all. I'm actually going to put up about 2,800 feet of temporary fence with him tomorrow. This guy is like 65, 70 years old, and he can still work circles around me. But he's a follower of Jesus. And people know that at the work. This guy doesn't mess around. And I'm really honored to work with the guy because he loves the Lord, and he shows that in how he works. That's his witness to his coworkers. Christians ought to be the most dedicated workers, the most skilled workers in our society. It's a good testimony. It's a poor testimony to do sloppy work, to be that 200-pound weight being dragged through the sand. You should do your best. So have you committed your work to God? To say it again, work dominates our lives. Are you ready to be wiser with your work? How do we do it? Well, we seek God's direction through prayer and through planning, and we show up. We work hard. We sharpen our skills on a regular basis. Right? We keep on learning. We serve with integrity. We share the profits back, and then we stay with it. We stick to it. We have that grit. So I want to encourage you this morning, commit your work to the God, and you'll be wiser with your work.